Hallelujah! Christ is risen! Right. Okay, we're going to play that one more time. Hallelujah! Christ is risen!
The Lord is risen indeed!
Excellent! Oh, yes! Jesus called her by name. She is standing by the tomb and she is weeping because her hope is gone. She does not know what to do with this. She is in the midst of this dark time, and she thinks that Jesus is gone, and all that she believed in, all that she followed, everything that she had put her stakes in is gone. And all of a sudden, she hears her name. Mary. When we hear our name, we are God's beloved, each and every one of us. We imagine that Mary Magdalene, who in John's Gospel is the only woman at the tomb. In John's Gospel, she is the only one that goes back. She isn't carrying spices. She isn't there to do a job. In John's Gospel, everything's about relationship. Everything's about our relationship with each other and our relationship with Jesus and God. And so she is going back to this place with an open and broken heart, like, how do I go? Where do I go from here in the midst of my pain? Imagine she's just weeping. The guys, of course, have gone home. No offense. They came and they looked and they did respond when she went and got them, and they did come back, and then they did go home. And she is still like, what am I to do next? And she continues to pray, and all of a sudden, she hears her name. But like so many of us, right? It must be, maybe it's the gardener. I pray, how is it that I'm going to get through this loss of a job? How am I going to get through this divorce? How am I going to get through this person passing? How am I going to get through this broken heart of mine? Mary must not be God. Just because it's the only person I've been asking over and over and over again. We hear Jesus call her by name because Mary Magdalene knows what it's like to pray and to be at that. In 12-step programs, we call it the gift of desperation. She knows what it means to have no other place to turn and to pray with a vengeance that's just your last-ditch effort. Because Jesus had healed her earlier in the story of many demons. And from the time she was healed, from the time she started to get better, she ended up devoting her life to Jesus and to God. She really believed not only because Jesus told her, but because her story was a witness, just like ours is. Each one of you have a story that is a witness to the grace of God, whether you think so or not. And so here she is, standing there, wondering. And then all of a sudden, she hears her name. Mary. What do we do when we have an experience of God? What do we do when we're actually really kind of, in spite of ourselves, aware that maybe God is actually present in our lives? Maybe we don't really want to tell anybody, but maybe we could. What could we do with that? This morning we celebrate with Easter eggs. Thank you, Joanne. We celebrate with all of our own rituals and traditions. This day we wonder, we say, Christ is risen, but what does it mean? What does it mean? Because if it doesn't mean anything, I hope you'll have a good dinner. But what does it mean? Because we must be changed by this. No matter what it means to you. So how is it when she hears her name, she knows that it has not been a mirage. She knows that her faith wasn't a mistake. She knows that she really was healed by God. And so she's gone from fear that place of fear and desperation and darkness and loneliness. And now she goes to joy. Not the joy like when you get the best present, and I like to get presents. I'm not against good presents. But that joy of like, wow, it's going to be okay. That joy from way down in your belly, like, there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be okay. And how do we find that joy? Very often we find that joy in other people. Very often we find that joy in communities like this where people can tell common stories and find their way through. How did you get through the loss of this job? I didn't know what I was. How did you walk through the divorce? How did you possibly manage? How did you manage the loss of a spouse or child? How did you get through the darkness? And all of a sudden that morning comes when you wake up and there's a little bit of light and levity. Maybe you laugh for the first time. And you go, oh, am I supposed to laugh? Yes, you are supposed to laugh. You are supposed to laugh and give thanks because we are part of something larger. Because what we're here about this morning is it isn't just about where we are today. It's about something larger than ourselves. Some of us as Christians, we put our stake in the ground that it's about God, it's about Jesus, it's about the Holy Spirit. But we can look at traditions across the board, east and west, and you will hear stories about how we are part of something larger. So that joy comes. And so what happens? What does she say? She takes off. She started running. We have a member of our congregation that is taken to running. She ran her first half marathon this year, and I'm enormously impressed. But anyway, all that's to say, so she started running. She turned around and she ran because she had to tell somebody. Because this is good news. It isn't just like, well, I did get the grocery shopping done yesterday, which I did, but it's like, no, like, this is really, this Jesus thing, this God, this is real. Like, there is something larger than ourselves. There is light after the dark part. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And so what is it? Like, if you could imagine, what is it that what would have to happen to you to have you say, I have got to go tell somebody. I've got to. Now, I recognize that I am talking to Episcopalians. Some of you that have been Episcopalians for a very long time know that for years we were called the frozen chosen. Some of you know that we don't do evangelism, and that is, we thought that was a bad word. It's not, for the record, but that's a whole other series. But the point is, we are called to tell others when God is working in our lives, and we don't have to feel weird about it. I hope you've had some time in your life when you know that God is there. I've had members of our congregation that in the midst of, since I've been here, maybe somebody in their life had a car accident. They texted everybody and everybody rallied. Tell somebody that you are there for them. Because God is there and God comes through. So we have that joy. So I invite you this morning after you have your cool eggs and your great lunch to think, what is it? What is it that would cause you to say, I've got to go tell somebody about this? If you want to tell them you were at St. Thomas Episcopal Church, 5 Hill Street in Dover, I won't be mad. But you don't have to tell them anything about us if you don't want to. You can just tell them about your experience with God. Because we've gone from fear, we've gone from pain, we've gone from joy, and now the next part, which is so something. I don't want to offend anybody, so I don't want to say it's so on anybody, but like the whole obedience, like what do you do with it? I thanked somebody the other day for doing some different things around here, which I'm still surprised when people are surprised when I thank them, because I'm very grateful. And I thanked somebody the other day for working, and she said, it's not work to me when I'm there. It helps me. I'm making friends. I feel at peace when I'm there. Hello, that's what Jesus is telling us to do. If there's something, how do you give it back? How do you give it back? Jan Richardson is a author and theologian. She talks about Easter. She says, this is an invitation. We have this wonderful invitation. It's a threshold and a gate, because guess what? Easter isn't a day. It's 50 days. And no, it doesn't mean you have to come to church for the next 50 days. And if you do, I probably won't be here this week. But anyway, but what you do get to do is live into what is it that you are going to do with the good news. What is it that you're going to do with it? It is an invitation. Maybe during Lent you were able to feel some connection. What do you do with that? Lastly, she says, all you need to remember is how it sounded. When you stood in the place of death, when you stood at your darkest time, when you stood on that threshold, when you couldn't imagine how you were going to get through the next minute, and you stood in that place and heard the living call the living. Today, we celebrate the risen Christ. We celebrate the good news of our faith. We celebrate community and family and love, but most of all, we celebrate God. We celebrate and remember that God is giving us an invitation. And that can you hear your name? Mary. Mary.